Welcome to The Business on Radio Verulam, the voice of your local business community.
Hello and welcome to The Business. I'm Trevor Merriden with the show that's essential listening for the West Herts business community. Our special this evening is All in the Mind. How resilient are you in business? Phrases like resilience and mental toughness are commonly bandied around as virtues, but what exactly are they and how do they help us run a better business? Helping us to explore this issue today is Dr. Graham Jones, expert and author of books on the subject of mental toughness and thriving under pressure. He's worked closely with Olympic and world champions from a variety of sports, military personnel and senior leaders of their teams in Fortune 500 companies. Also with us in St Albans is our very own Craig Hunter. Not only is Craig founding director of award-winning consultancy Versec, but also a former director of British Swimming and chef de mission for the Paralympics GB team. And if that's not enough wisdom from the experts, we have plenty more from the experiences of three local businesses. Philippa Bell, MD of Harper Foods, will be in the studio. Then we'll have Laura Moxham from Frontline Connect and Mike Meldrum from the Mortgage Mine, all of them telling us how to bounce back and keep themselves and their businesses fighting fit. I'm not sure how we'll fit it all in, but I'm sure we'll thrive under the pressure of all, won't we, Vicky Scott and Clare McAnulty?
Oh, I do hope so.
Yeah. We certainly hope so. What have you noticed in the news this week, Vicky?
Well, without sounding too much like a SWAT, when I was researching this whole concept of resilience for the show tonight, I learned some really interesting behavioural psychology stuff. And I think it could come in quite handy for lots of small businesses that find themselves in difficult situations. The principle is, when you're on a hill, be a clutch. Don't choke.
Like it.
It's quite clever, isn't it?
Yep.
And it's all about something called procedural memory. What procedural memory is, it's the process, often considered to be motor skills, that we do unconsciously. So imagine you're in a situation that you find yourself where you're using your sort of procedural memory. You do it in normal circumstances. If you get into high pressure situations, quite often your body tries to sort of get over your procedural memory and do the stuff on its own, and it doesn't very often work.
Yeah.
And it's something that sports people can find, very, very simply, that if they practice something over and over and over again, the sort of muscle memory gets burned into your unconscious and your body instinctively knows what to do. If, however, you overthink something, then everything sort of goes completely wrong. Your intuition goes out of the window and everything starts sort of getting confused. So how does one actually stop yourself overthinking? How do you stop that procedural memory kicking in? Well, the key, and I've got sort of three top tips here, the key to being a clutch, not a choke, is first of all to distract yourself. That's the classic. Imagine yourself on the stage, you're just about to start talking, and you have to think of the audience either sort of on the loo or naked. Distract yourself. Don't let yourself get sort of overthink the issue.
Yes.
The second is, and this is another classic, is to develop a mantra. Lots of people have these. Relax and breathe is one that a lot of people use. Take a drink, smile and start is another. And I know that sports people have all sorts of, sort of ways of doing that mantra thing. And then the other thing that's probably the most difficult is to focus on the target and not the mechanics. And I see this when I'm helping people, stand up and do public speaking. Yeah. People sort of forget how to talk. They forget what their name is because they're trying to memorise what it is that they've written on a sheet.
Yes.
And actually, if they just do it as a simple conversation, not trying to remember it, then it'll come out more smoothly.
And the best things about what they say are often those that are off the cuff, where they
are
reacting to something. Yeah.
And it's something that we use when we're interviewing for this show. I very often say to people, don't think about the microphone, just answer the questions that I'm asking you. Just talk to me. It'll be so much better than trying to look at notes, trying to remember what it is you were planning to say. It works so much better. So procedural memory, be a clutch, don't choke when you're on a hill. I thought that was great.
I think that's absolutely wonderful. There is the sort of trying too hard kind of thing. My story is a bit different, but it's a different kind of resilience. This is about organisational resilience, and And the story I saw this week was about the high street, showing ability to bounce back. Now, we see a lot of sort of empty high street stories on this show and in the general media. A new research from Deloitte shows that about 1 in 5 high street shops affected by the retail collapse of the last 5 years, yes, is indeed still vacant. But also the same survey shows that the high street's actually outperforming retail parks and shopping centres when it comes to reoccupying empty shops. And many big names we know like HMV, Comet and Blockbuster went under as the recession hit and online shopping sort of grew. But Deloitte thinks that the high street was actually showing great resilience, because what's actually taken their place is maybe not shops that are to everybody's taste, but the discount and the pound shops, actually acquired 1 in 5 of the empty of the properties, and convenience stores have also expanded strongly, have gone up by between about 10 and 20%. And I think that rather than taking shoppers away, I mean, the internet in some ways is pushing people back to shops with the growth of click and collect, for example.
Yes.
So it's not that the high street is dying, as many people seem to think, but actually things are just changing their form. So, and every town's kind of going to be different, but I suppose this research shows to me is that there's a lot of resilience there amongst businesses, and that overall things aren't quite as gloomy as the sort of Porter's reviews.
Yeah, it's
and
interesting.
Things.
It is interesting. It's interesting. I actually picked up on this story as well, and the thing that struck in my head was that, in fact, 73% of the high street is now occupied versus 28% of the retail parks.
Yeah.
So, people are changing their attitude. And, I mean, if you think about lots of people saying they don't like this pound land and the pound stretcher shops, etc. But that's how Woolworths started. Everything for £1 or something, or, that's how Marks and Spencer started. Yeah. So it's going back to the basics of retail, which is find something that people want and give it to them.
Yeah.
And just at the moment, people want things that are cheap and cheerful, and so why not give it to them? And that will also make way for, as we know, some of the more independent stores, some of the pop-up stores that equally people are looking for these days.
That's absolutely right. I mean, people aren't going to stop wanting things. It's just the nature of what it is that they want. Claire, what's caught your eye?
Well, just a different type of story this week. I was interested to read a report concerning micro businesses. That's businesses with less than 9 employees, and obviously that quite a lot of us fit into that category. This report by Bibby Financial Services was conducted in the last quarter of last year, so very recently, and involved 500 micro businesses. What the research showed was that despite all the importance supposedly placed on social media, over 3/4 of these micro businesses didn't regard social media as essential.
Okay.
And instead, word of mouth and referrals was given as a way they were most likely to get business. The percentages, though, did depend on what type of business was asked, and interestingly, almost half, 46% of service sector businesses said that social media was important, in contrast to the manufacturing businesses where only 14% thought it was. Some other findings were that LinkedIn was the most used form of social media, with over a third, 37% of small businesses using it. This was followed by Facebook at 27%, Twitter at 17%, and YouTube at 15%. And funnily enough, despite supposedly being very, very popular, Instagram and Pinterest were only used by 3% of micro businesses. So the question is, what can we get from the report? Well, perhaps instead of trying to be across all the social media platforms, which I feel is what we all try and do, is stick to the ones that your potential clients and customers are likely to be found in. Common sense it is, really. So LinkedIn then does seem to be the most popular and a bit of a must. And certainly if I look at my own business and how I get it, I do still mainly get business from people I know, from word of mouth and referrals.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you find, Trevor?
Well, I think it's almost all word of mouth and referrals. I think what is different, though, is about how those word of mouths and referrals actually come about. And what I have noticed is that there is a very close link between if I'm saying something on social media or starting a little sort of campaign of my own, or trying to be sort of regular in what I'm doing, the regular drumbeat of activity might cause somebody somewhere to actually think, when they're talking to somebody else about, do you know somebody who can write this or do that? They say, oh, that chap Trevor Merriden, maybe he can do it. He seems to, be able. They won't necessarily be doing it because of what I tweet or because of what I do, but it's just the presence, I think, actually. I mean, I think there is a common sense thing, though, that social media is the same as anything else, really. If your buyers aren't on social media, then don't use social media. It's you can use it, but there are very few businesses that aren't using it. I think in some form or another. But I think that's the thing. It's common sense. In the end of the day, are your buyers there, and do they help you get business?
Well, I think the other thing to think about is how you use each of the individual areas, and certainly, as a marketing person advising people where to go. If you're in the creative arena, then you quite often are doing mood boards anyway. Pinterest is just another mood board, and it's a great way of showcasing your creativity. If you're an interior designer, if you're making cakes, if you've got to visually show something, Pinterest is easy. It's what you do all the time, and it might be perfect. Now, there aren't that many micro businesses that aren't using it that I know. Likewise, Twitter is a fantastic way of getting to and following the journalists that are within your field. So actually, they might not be customers.
Yes,
but
they
could be really massive influencers or thought leaders for you, and that's really, really valuable.
Yeah.
And in fact, the other thing the report had was that most businesses used social media to get news. So even though they didn't use it to get customers or clients, they did use it for news. Just like Vicky's saying, it keeps you up to date with what's going on.
I think that's an often overlooked point, is that social media is a search engine.
It's
as
fantastic.
Well as,
absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
And I think what you said, marketing is no longer linear. It's about an holistic approach. So the more touch points you've got with the more people, the more likely you are to get something in return. Yeah. And I've been active because of if I'm talking about it, then I've got to be pretty active. And I've had business from all areas now. It's taken a while to get organised. It's taken a while for the feedback to come through, and to me actually to know that I've got business solely as a result of being on those platforms. Okay. But it's like all marketing; it's about continuity. It's about, there's no point in doing a bit here and a bit there and dabbling. You've got to actually add a bit of continuity, and you will get some results. And also know what it is that you're trying to focus on. Yeah. I think focus is going to come up later in the show, but
should we go for a bit of a break, and then we'll be right back after this.
Has your child outgrown day nursery? Would you like them to attend a more structured environment with a wide range of interesting and challenging activities?
I like cooking stuff with Mrs. Federici.
Mount Carmel Kindergarten in Sandpit Lane is now offering extended sessions, so even if you work, your child can enjoy an outstanding environment that prepares them for school and is somewhere they will want to go to every day.
I like playing games. I love my teachers.
For more, see our website at mountcarmelkindergarten.co.uk. Mount Carmel Kindergarten, private education for little people.
Mount Carmel Kindergarten.
Hi, this is Danny Smith. Join me weekdays from 4 till 7 p.m. for West Herts Drive Time, with features including Chris's Film Club, Pound Saver, Community Notice Board, Calendar Artist, Hot Topics and many more besides. We also feature correspondence covering topics such as lifestyle, consumer advice, cooking, interior design and travel. We have regular interviews, local news and sports, celebrity birthdays, travel and traffic updates and competitions as well. That's all on West Herts Drive Time with me, Danny Smith, on 92.6 FM, Radio Verulam.
You're listening to The Business on Radio Verulam. We're the voice of the local business community on 92.6 FM and on radioverulam.com.
Welcome back to The Business. As we said before, we're exploring the subject of resilience and mental toughness in this week's edition. Helping us to explore this issue today is Dr. Graham Jones, expert and author of books on the subject of mental toughness and things like thriving under pressure. He's worked closely with Olympic and world champions from a variety of sports. And I started by asking Graham something rather obvious, actually. What do we mean by terms like resilience and mental toughness?
That's a really good question. It's a very basic question, but within it is a problem, because they're terms bandied about by lots of people as if we all know what they mean, and then when you try and define them, nobody can actually define them. And essentially, it's about the ability to at the very least cope, but hopefully to thrive on those pressures. Specifically, it's about the ability to maintain belief, focus and motivation when the pressure's really on, and the ability to bounce back is evidence actually of people being resilient and mentally tough.
Is there anything that's sort of, when people take the word tough, for example, they take different things from it. Do you get some sort of common misconceptions about what you mean by mental toughness? Yeah, absolutely. I have to be really careful sometimes when I'm talking about this stuff, because there's a real danger that people associate it with a toughness that's unhelpful. So people think about inflexibility. Do you mean the sort of macho toughness? Almost. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, actually. Inflexibility, stubbornness, single-mindedness, unemotional. But in fact, it's the very opposite of those things. It's can be thought of as maybe the softer elements, the very opposite of the tough bits. Being open-minded, willingness to change, responsive to feedback, showing emotions. Not being frightened of showing emotions is really important. So, it does create a problem. Actually, you're right. People talk about resilience or toughness in organisations, sort of future-proofing organisations and or making them recession-proof or so on and so on. But are we talking here? You can talk about resilience of individuals and resilience of organisations. Is one just the sum of the other, or is it a bit more complex than that? In my experience, they can be very different. Similar, but often they're very different. So you can have resilient people who have to be resilient because the organisation isn't. Actually, come across a few of those. So if the strategy, the environment, the culture is inappropriate, then organisations don't have the sustainability that they need. And for me, that's what resilience in organisations is about. It's about sustainability. Resilience in people is more about their well-being, their engagement, etc. So they can be the same, but often I find that they're actually quite different. Right. So a bunch of tough cookies doesn't necessarily make a great cookie jar, then? That's a great way of putting it. Absolutely. Right. Okay. And are you saying then that you need a diversity of personality types in order for the organisation to be resilient? I wouldn't necessarily say personality types. I just say people that are different. I think when we start talking about personality, we get into a can of worms. But people with different backgrounds, experiences, perspectives, etc. The broader, the better. In my experience. Now, a lot of people would say that entrepreneurs are born rather than made, and I'm sure this is a sort of some hoary old chestnut for you. But is it the case that you've either got it or you haven't, or is sort of things like mental toughness and resilience learnable skill? Okay, I'll bore you with the research I've done on this just for a moment, so that's okay. Because the research I did was with elite athletes, some of the world's best sport performers actually. Did some work with salespeople, equity traders, etc. Just getting to learn how they had developed their mental toughness. They were all elite performers, and most of them had experienced significant setbacks, and had learned how to bounce back, etc. And you hear many stories of leaders who made it who failed early on, actually. And so I think if you've got mental toughness that's natural, I think you're pretty lucky, actually. So it's developable. The problem is because people aren't entirely sure what it is. People don't know where to start. Where people like you and I have to sort of help them with those definitions.
That was Dr. Graham Jones. He's the author and managing director of Top Performance Consulting Limited, and he's written all sorts of books about thriving under pressure and mental toughness. Vicky?
So in the studio we've got guests Philippa Bell, the MD of Harpers Food, and Craig Hunter. Not only is Craig founding director of award-winning consultancy Versec, but also involved in all sorts of sport and Paralympics, etc. So welcome, ladies and gents. So resilience and the ability to cope. How do you bounce back when things go wrong? What Graham just said was it's about believing in yourself, about focusing on the task, and also about keeping motivated. So just how tough is tough. And what I'd like to do is start with the believing in oneself approach. So, Philippa, believing in yourself, I've got a sort of suspicion that it's easier if you're the boss than it is if you're one of the workers. Is that important? And how do you go about maintaining belief in yourself in your business? Just to start on an easy one.
Just an easy one, yeah. It probably is easy. Well, I don't know. I say it is easier to believe in yourself if you're the boss. You get the proof of your own abilities a bit more, I think, if you're the boss. But I think you can believe in yourself if you're an employee. It's just believing in your own abilities, really.
How do you help the people that you work with to believe that that they can do it if they're struggling?
I believe in making sure that somebody takes charge of their own job. Now, whether that's from a warehouse man up to one of the directors, I think one of the problems is if you try and take something away from somebody, you're not giving them the opportunity to learn by their own mistakes, if you like.
But almost take ownership of
that
element, and how that element fits into what might well be a chain of events to an end goal. But if they take responsibility for that one part, then and they get it absolutely right, then that can help them be self-motivated, because that link in the chain is important. Yeah, and also to allow them to make their own mistakes as well. I mean, that is as important, because you're not going to grow if you don't make mistakes. Yeah. If somebody takes that away from you. Absolutely. Craig, you've worked with athletes. Belief must be absolutely crucial in that sort of arena.
It absolutely is. I was fortunate enough when I was working with elite athletes to lead a couple of amazing teams, both at the Commonwealth Games in Delhi and the Paralympic team in London 2012. And I came late to this book, and I really wished I'd had it before in my portfolio. It's called Shackleton's Way. And Shackleton was an amazing leader of people. And I think, just picking up on Philippa's point, when you're in charge of leading a team, you just can't give up. So whether you have that real self-belief all the time, if you know that people are relying on you, it forces you to have that greater resilience than I think perhaps otherwise you might have had if you were just perhaps even a sole trader or a small business. People are relying on you, and that forces you to stand up, be counted, and absolutely to have that resilience and toughness to ensure that not only do you get the most out of the opportunity, but also those people who are relying on you as well.
So the second point that was made in the interview was about focus. Now, is this just about business plans, about targets, about action plans? What else could small businesses really do to help them keep focused? And, is there really room for that macho toughness? Or is it, is that just a smart word for bullying?
I don't like the idea of macho toughness.
Nor do I.
No. I don't know.
Is it
in terms of focus? I think you've got to focus on where you want to be, where you eventually want to be. Now, that's not. I suppose it's a business plan, but in a much looser sense, because when times are tough, it's very hard to keep to a sort of predetermined path. You've got to be very flexible and react to outside influences that are going to change what you're doing, but maintaining the eventual focus.
Yes, I mean, it is easy to be sort of pulled off track when times do get tough.
Yeah.
So maintaining the bigger focus whilst being a bit flexible. Would you say that's important, Craig?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, life is all about having a plan. There's that great saying, isn't there? Failing to plan is planning to fail, and life is absolutely like that. I remember when we arrived into Delhi for the Commonwealth Games, and I think this is a great analogy that I live by fairly regularly, is we were very, very focused on what we needed to do, and circumstances meant that we took our eye off the ball. We weren't focusing on, because everything was around us was falling apart, our core role, which was to make sure everything, all the venues were great for competition, for example. We didn't even bother about that because we were so focused on making sure that all of the athlete accommodation was safe and fit. And suddenly we were like, the athletes are about to arrive and we haven't looked at any of the venues. So it became this real, my goodness me, and all of the other countries were doing exactly the same, and we'd taken our eye off the ball. It was completely.
But in many ways, that was something that you couldn't control or anticipate beforehand because it wasn't of your doing. But then it suddenly became your problem.
Completely.
Yeah.
So you set out with a plan, and I think, as Philippa was saying, along the way you have to just keep readdressing that plan to make sure that it's still fit for what you're trying to achieve. Because curveballs are constantly, nothing is ever perfect, and when things suddenly come in and you have to change your focus, different influences, and that can be all sorts of things along the way that and things that you're least expecting.
So be flexible, be prepared, but have a sort of long-term plan, so you don't get sort of unfocused or defocused. I'm not quite sure which is the right word. So the final thing in the last clip was about motivation. And motivation is so many different things to so many people. There was a perception that people used to think that it was just all about money. And then it became more about time for some people. And, there's lots of different things. How do you find out, A, what motivates yourself, but also what motivates the people that you work with so that you can get more out of them? How did you go about that, Philippa, in your business?
Well, I think you learn from the personality of the person that you're working with, because some people are motivated by money. Some people are motivated by their own sense of achievement and their own pride in the job. So each person's different, and you really need to judge what motivates them to enable you to go forward. And it's very often, I think, motivation can be quite small. Can be just simply saying thank you to somebody can be very motivating.
It's amazing how that tap on the back,
Definitely.
And that sort of round of applause can really help. How do you get a tap on the back yourself, though? Who gives you a tap on the back?
The bank manager occasionally. Not very often.
Nice. What about you, Craig? You're talking about a whole heap of athletes here, keeping them motivated when they're losing races. How do you go about that?
It is about recognition. I think whoever you're working with, and I love that sense of working within a team. Yes, you might be the person who's in charge and the leader, but along the way you have that interaction with people. And just, somebody greeting you in the morning with a smiley face, whereas the day before, you'd had a few kind words to them and they weren't feeling so great. The next morning, suddenly they come along and say, I really appreciated what you said to me yesterday, or how you helped me, or just even, a high five as you're walking past somebody. It makes you feel good. And actually, sometimes the reward isn't about money or anything. It's about seeing how people are growing in themselves as well. That can be, just as rewarding as anything else.
Craig, is this? I mean, obviously you've worked in the sports area, but also you work in the sort of the business and board effectiveness area. I mean, how much of the world of sport is transferable? The lessons that you've picked up from that. I mean, it's not a percentage answer I'm after exactly, but there must be some things that do translate quite well, and some things that perhaps are best kept in the world of sport.
Actually, I think both the world of sport and the world of commerce learn equally from one another, and there's been an amazing partnership. And if you do, there's a great article between. It's Dave Brailsford, who headed up our cycling team historically, the most successful cycling team we've ever had, and their partnership with Team Sky and Sky Broadcasting. And in the FT last year, there was an amazing article between the CEO and Dave Brailsford as the performance director, talking about the synergies and absolutely how running a cycling team was so like running, a major global business. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, there's absolutely that learning and cross-fertilisation.
So, lots of really good ideas, lots of really good experiences. How are we going to proceed with those things, and how are we going to use them to become more resilient in business? We're going to find out a bit more after the break.
Radio Verulam Community Partners. The Abbey Line connects St Albans Abbey train station at the bottom of Holywell Hill with Watford Junction and was one of the UK's first official community railways.
The community rail concept was designed to help create a more sustainable future, to reduce the cost of running the line without compromising safety or service, and to involve local people more closely in the development of their railway.
For 150 years, the Abbey Line has been taking people between St Albans and the centre of Watford and beyond.
It continues to do this, and all for at most £6.60 return, and in only 16 minutes.
For more information, visit their website, which is abbeyline.org.uk.
For more on Radio Verulam Community Partners, go to radioverulam.com/community partners.
If you want to know what's going on in St Albans and West Herts, then join Telegraph journalist Louisa Peacock as she debates the local current affairs and news of the week with live guests every Tuesday from 7 p.m. right here on 92.6 FM Radio Verulam. Tweet along with the show at RV Outspoken or at Louisa Peacock. Outspoken, Radio Verulam's local news and current affairs show with Louisa Peacock, Tuesdays 7 p.m. right here on 92.6 FM Radio Verulam.
You're listening to The Business on Radio Verulam. We're the voice of the local business community on 92.6 FM and on radioverulam.com.
Welcome back to The Business. It's just coming up to 25 minutes to the hour. We're discussing resilience and mental toughness. In the studio with us is Philippa Bell, MD of Harpers Food, and Craig Hunter of consultancy firm Versec. Now, I'd like to open the second part of the discussion with an interview our very own Vicky Scott did earlier in the week with Laura Moxham. Now, Laura's had 14 years of running a business called Tech Angels, a local computer support company. And Vicky started by asking if there have been difficult times during those 14 years.
Absolutely. I mean, the main thing, I think, as being an entrepreneur is that you have to be able to ride the emotional roller coaster. 1 minute, the team is doing fantastic and we're hitting targets that we wanted to achieve. And then something drops off the next week, something doesn't quite work as you wish it to do. So you've really got to pick up your things and carry on and just remember what the end goal is in mind. And that's what you should be targeting at. And if you look at things on a day-to-day basis, it can, when you're going down, things can be tricky.
Look pretty grim. And how do you, you can be resilient in yourself, but how do you transfer that resilience into a team?
Well, what we tend to do is have quarterly targets, and we'll have silly things like come up with a great idea and get a bottle of wine, or come in with donuts or coffee or something like that. It's the little things that can make a difference to people's attitude and how they're feeling about things. Team spirit is one of the most important things to be able to get right in the team.
And that's interesting, that it doesn't have to be big things like incredibly complex structured bonuses. That, a packet of Dunkin' Donuts or a bottle of wine can work just as effectively.
Yeah, and I think it's very important to do it perhaps even on the spur of the moment. It doesn't have to be something that's planned, doesn't have to be something that's calculated. Just coming up and giving your team a pat on the back when they've done a great job. It feels great. It gives you a little high five to yourself. So it's very motivating.
And how do you tap yourself on the back?
I go and give my daughter and son a cuddle. And my husband's incredible as well. It's just having a very, very supportive family around me that understand what I'm trying to achieve and believe in me. And I think that's the biggest thing as well.
And how important is resilience in business?
You've got to have blinkers on. I think it's really important that, like I said, you've got a goal in mind, you know what you're trying to get to, and if you've got to have really, really strong motivation on keeping yourself going throughout that. And not take yourself off the rails. So if somebody comes up with an opportunity that might be coming your way, then, how does that fit in with the goals that I'm trying to achieve?
It sounds as though it's also quite important to have that plan in the first place.
Yes.
So you know where your goals are, you know what you're sticking to, and you know the sorts of paths.
Yeah.
How important is your plan to Tech Angels?
My plan is vital. I mean, that's what makes me get up in the morning and gives me the goals that I want to achieve. And the way that I actually use that on a day-to-day basis is that I kind of hide myself away, put headphones on so the team know that I'm focusing, and I work my day throughout in 90-minute chunks. So I know that I've got my end goal. Okay, what today am I going to do in my 90-minute chunks that's going to take me closer to achieving that goal? And if there's a particular activity that I'm working on that isn't taking me close to the goal, then don't do it.
In this sort of roller coaster that is business today, have you got any hot tips that you could share with people?
Give yourself a structure of what you want to plan so that by the end of the day you can actually feel that you're making a difference. You know, you've come up with a marketing activity, you've got out an email that's created some interest with your customer base. So I would say think about what you're trying to achieve on your long-term goals, work those back almost to daily goals as to what you want to achieve, and then come up with, say, 4 90-minute chunks to do throughout the day.
Fantastic. It's really great to hear that Tech Angels is going so well. Laura, if people want to get in touch with you for some of this fantastic computer support, how do they go about that?
Contact us on 01727 568 869, or alternatively email us at info@tech-angels, that's tech-angels.co.uk. Also, you can find us on Facebook, we're very active there, and also Twitter.
Thank you very much, Laura. Some very, very good tips. Thank you.
That was Laura Moxham, as you heard from Tech Angels, a local computer support company. Crikey, we're all thinking how well organised she is. 90-minute chunks, and it's quite daunting. She sounds very well organised.
Some simple tips there, though, weren't they? And certainly reiterating an awful lot of what we've said. And to think that she actually hadn't heard the clip from Graham earlier, it just goes to show that these sort of simple approaches are relatively straightforward. So wine and donuts is what kicks her off. What do you think about the breaking the day up into 90-minute slugs? Is that realistically possible?
Well, I wish it was. I've never been that organised, I must admit. Talking about reacting to outside events, or you can come in with a plan of exactly what you're going to do in the day, and then something happens and you get called into some other area, and it all goes out the window, I find. Do you have lists that you tick off? Loads of lists. I have my to-do list permanently. I need that anyway because I would forget things. But it doesn't always work. I don't always get as many items ticked off as I'd like to, certainly.
Craig, do you have certain days when you get all your things ticked off in 30 minutes rather than 90, and others when it doesn't happen?
I don't think I've ever managed to achieve everything in 30 minutes, but I'm a huge list focused person, and I think that helps me to structure my working day. But I don't think there's one size fits all either. I mean, you hear lots of people about how you should manage your inbox, on a daily basis. Should you, some people say you should have 5 minutes every hour just to manage your inbox on your, your PC, or, I'm actually one of those people who likes to manage it constantly. So I'm constantly going backwards and forwards and dealing with email, just because we're very customer focused and our customers and clients, want us to be responding in a timely manner. So I think it's a bit horses for courses. I think your day has to be structured. There are certain key things that you absolutely know you've got to nail in a day, and there are other things that are nice to have. But you may well catch up with those later on in the day or later on in the week. It depends. It's about prioritisation at the end of the day.
It is, isn't it? And there's lots of sort of catchphrases. Eat a frog for breakfast and all of that sort of stuff. I must admit, in my business, I've always found that as long as you've got a reasonably clear idea of what it is that you should have achieved, then you can carry things over into another day. You can actually work smart, which is, if I'm in the mood to be creative, then I'll do that bit that was creative rather than the bit that was, the finances. That's things like that.
There are definitely days when you are in the right frame of mind to attack a certain task. Yeah. Whether it's at the top of the list or not, if you're not in that right frame of mind, I think it can be quite difficult. And another time, you would achieve what you wanted to achieve far easier.
I mean, we all put off, don't we, doing certain key tasks. I mean, a bit like, the tax return or the VAT return, because we know it's got to be done, but it's kind of tedious. And then, you know it's got to be done and put it off, and then suddenly you do it and you think, I don't know why I put that off, because it's been hanging over me like that sort of Damocles, but actually it only took me 20 minutes instead of the 2 hours, and suddenly I've got all of that free time.
And doesn't it feel fantastic when you've done it? When you sort of feel as though a great big weight's been lifted off your shoulders. So I think that a lot of what's going on in all of these different comments is very, very similar. What I think we're going to do now is we're going to go for a quick break, and then we are going to hear from Mike Meldrum.
Radio Verulam Community Partners.
Whether you need cat advice, want to adopt a rescue cat, or have time on your hands to help with volunteering, St Albans and District Cat Protection would like to hear from you. For more details, contact St Albans and District Cats Protection on 0845 371 2064, or visit the website www.stalbans.cats.org.uk.
For more on Radio Verulam Community Partners, go to radioverulam.com/community partners.
Looking for something fun to do? Or fancy taking up a new hobby? Join me, Ellie O'Fara, and my lovely guests as we'll explore the very best activities on offer and things to do in our local area. This Friday from midday on 92.6 FM, Radio Verulam.
If you want to get in touch with the business on Radio Verulam, phone us on 01727 839 926 or email thebusiness@radioverulam.com.
Welcome back to the business. It's just coming up to 9:15. Now, we've been talking about the a question of resilience and mental toughness in business. We've had Philippa Bell and Craig Hunter in the studio with us, and also Victoria Scott and Clare McAnulty. And we've actually had a call from Mike Meldrum from the Mortgage Mine, and we hope very much that we've got him on the line now. We're just going to see if he's there. Mike, are you there?
Yes. Good evening, Trevor. How are you doing?
That's great and wonderful. Why not tell us your story of sort of resilience you've had at a sort of personal and also a business level in your business?
Well, probably like the same as most people in the financial services sector. I woke up one morning in October 2008, had a full order book, plenty of clients, and suddenly didn't have any banks to deal with. And quite literally, my business had melted away overnight.
Was that recessionary based, or?
Absolutely, it was the beginning of the recession. All the banks literally pulled out of the mortgage market overnight, and suddenly you have a whole load of clients, you have a whole load of working process, and absolutely nowhere to place those clients anymore. The game just stopped overnight.
Okay, so
what
did you do?
If I tell you the truth, what I did was I took the duvet and I pulled it over my head and shut my eyes and hoped it would go away. But frankly, you can't do that for very long.
No, it's not a long-term solution, is it?
It's not really a very long-term solution, but there were a lot of people in the market that just didn't do anything. It's very easy, as I'm sure you've been talking about tonight, when you're under pressure like that, just to freeze and do nothing. But that's the worst thing that you can do.
Do you mind me asking, did you have a sort of freeze moment then? I mean, joking aside about duvets, but did you have a sort of Corporal Jones, don't panic sort of moment?
Absolutely, I had.
Yeah.
I mean, I watched a six-figure income melt away to less than £10,000 in the space of no time whatsoever. Very, very difficult, and it's very difficult to know what to do next. The solution, or one of the solutions, is frankly to go back to your business plan.
Yeah.
Because you've created your business plan while your thinking is lucid, while you're feeling confident, and you'll have items in your business plan that says that what you want to do is go and revisit some of those items that you never had a go at. And certainly what I also do now in my new business plans is I have a contingency that says when something bad happens, what else can you do?
Yeah.
So, for example, you've got clients, maybe you can't sell them in my business, mortgages, but perhaps there's other products that those clients could be potentially purchasing, so go and do that. So the business plan is absolutely key to how you make your business resilient.
We were talking, I think Craig Hunter made the point about sort of planning to fail by failing to plan.
That's right. You will have a plan, and some parts of your plan will work easily, and you'll go in and you'll do those. But there'll be other parts of the plan which are quite good, but you just don't do them until you're under pressure.
Yeah.
One of the things that I always think that one of the keys for resilience is whenever you're dealing with customers, because you do get involved in customers' lives. I mean, many of us do in the service sector. You get to know the customers very well, you know their circumstances, and you really want to help them. But one of the things that I personally do to try and make myself more resilient is to make sure every conversation is transparent. Tell the customer everything. So they know exactly where they stand, they know exactly where you stand, and then they know if something comes out of the woodwork that nothing's been hidden from them.
So you take that to the extreme, do you? Then that
Absolutely.
sort of the transparency, so that even if it was sort of particularly bad news or unpalatable news, or you might lose their business as a result.
Yes, absolutely. Let them know everything, and so that they come along the journey with you. And I don't know if anyone else in the studio has mentioned this, but one of my pet phobias is that I hate these emails. When there's news to be had, it's so much better talking to the client. Talking to the client and letting them hear your voice, you hear their voice, and trying to solve the problem together, rather than saying, "Tough luck, Johnny, here's an email, don't bother me again."
Mike, you've just sort of elicited some sort of vigorous nodding in the studio. Philippa, you feel the same way?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think there's nothing worse than holding off on bad news. If bad news is given early, and people are given a chance to rectify things, it's far better.
Yeah.
Don't leave it. It doesn't get any better if you leave it.
It doesn't. And Victoria, I heard you using one of our favourite expressions about eating the frog. Get that frog eaten. As I said, bad news never gets better. I don't know if any... Alex Ferguson, the football manager, had a very interesting thought. Years ago, he sold one of the top strikers in the world, a chap called Ruud van Nistelrooy. And Alex Ferguson said there was something about him that he didn't like, but he couldn't put his finger on it. And he woke up one morning and he said, "I'm fed up worrying about him. I'm just going to get rid of him."
Right.
And that in business is so important. Business instincts are so highly tuned, because when you hear something that disturbs you, and it niggles and niggles and niggles, you'll always know something's wrong and something has to be done about it.
Yeah, I think that's Craig wants to come in with something.
Yeah, I just wonder whether there are two words that particularly if you're a customer-facing business, but I think it goes through pretty much everything that you deal with. I think it's integrity and authenticity. I think if you've got integrity, absolutely, face up to any bad news, face up to anything. If you've got some challenges, dealing with them face to face, it means that you've got some integrity, and the people that you're dealing with will have much, much greater respect. And we've said to a client before, "Sorry, we're not going to deal with you because we don't like the way that you operate." And I think that gave us great integrity. And then when we talked to another client around some challenging issues, they came back and said, "Well, we hadn't really recognised this. We actually really respect you for coming and talking to us in that way, and we've got to change our business practice based on what you've fed back to us."
Right. Okay, Mike, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. So thank you ever so much. That's Mike Meldrum from the mortgage mine. Now, we're coming up to 10 minutes to the hour now, and I think we're going to finish off where we started, actually, with Graham Jones, the top sort of business psychologist, author of books about mental toughness and thriving under pressure. And we got onto the subject of, once we moved beyond the sort of definitions, on something we've touched a little bit on earlier in the show about sort of macho definitions of toughness, and also female participation in leading businesses, and whether that changes things, and much else besides. So let's hear from Graham now.
Well, the principles are the same, whether you're male or female. I mean, the problem is when we start using definitions that you alluded to earlier about the macho side of toughness that people latch on to. For me, mental toughness is the same in both males and females. It's just problems that females encounter, in my experience, is when they try to be something and somebody they're not. You know, they try to embrace that sort of macho outlook and perspective and leadership style, etc. And for me, it's much more about trusting and believing in yourself and who you are, and not trying to be different. So I think from that perspective, they are the same. It's just when people try to be something they're not, or when females in particular try to be something they're not, it causes a problem.
We seem to be moving from a recessionary to a growth mindset, you know, albeit slowly in the economy. Now, when the good times come back, is it tougher to be tough, so to speak, if you don't have to? I mean, or put another way, how do you make tough decisions when the consequences of not making them are not immediately obvious if failure doesn't automatically follow?
Well, I'm going to answer that by first of all saying I think it's easier to get away with not being tough when times are good, but then we have to start thinking about, so what does tough mean, etc. And I don't want to go back down that route. In a book I'm actually publishing in a couple of months' time called Top Performance Leadership, I actually distinguish between safe and real leaders,
right. And
it's based on people's motives to be leaders, which drives their behaviour, it drives their leadership style in terms of whether, you know, they're going to be, quote, tough, or let people get away with underperformance, etc. And it's based on the idea that safe leaders are, and I'm talking about safe leaders at the extreme of a continuum here, but safe leaders' motives are not to take risks, not to put themselves on the line.
Yeah.
It's more about job security, you know, being able to pay the mortgage, etc. And they're not going to make those tough decisions that essentially might form risks. At the other extreme, you've got the real leaders whose motives are more about the organisation and making things happen, and so on. And as we get into the growth that everybody is hopefully anticipating, it's the real leaders that are going to make those decisions that need to be made to take advantage of it. It's the safe leaders that will hold the organisations back effectively. So it's a long-winded way of answering your question, but for me it's about motives that leaders tackle their jobs with.
Well, don't worry, Graham, it wasn't a long-winded way of answering the question. I thought it was quite a good way of answering the question. It was interesting, wasn't it, that different types of leaders, Vicky?
I think it's excellent and fascinating stuff. You know, I just don't think that a lot of safe leaders realise how much damage they're doing to a business by not taking on the challenges. What do you think about that, Philippa?
I would be surprised if there's many safe leaders in small businesses these days. I think possibly there are some safe leaders in larger corporations.
You just don't think you can afford to be safe in small business?
No, not at all. Not at all. I think the last 7 or 8 years would have seen off most of the safe leaders in small businesses.
What do you think, Craig?
You've absolutely got to be prepared to take a risk, haven't you? But it's gauging that risk. So you've got your plan, you know where you want to take your business, but business is all about taking risks, and it's about making sure that you don't overcommit with the wrong risks. So, but no, nobody in this day and age can afford to be risk averse, and that's actually one of the greatest challenges I think for most boards and leadership. Within organisations is around understanding their risk profile. What risks are you going to be prepared to take to make a profit? Because at the end of the day, that's what you're in business for.
It is interesting to think that, you know, if you don't have a board where you have got people that are questioning, if you've got a board that's made up of yes men, quite often it's the chairman that's created the board, and if you've got a chairman that surrounds themselves with yes men, then you are going to get the wrong sort of board out of that type of approach to leadership.
Completely. And I think, you know, people seem to have this notion that the boardroom should be a nice, quiet, easygoing place. Well, that's the recipe for disaster. I mean, you've absolutely got to challenge the chair, the chief executive on all sorts of aspects of the business to make sure that there is real integrity to the business plan. And really, you know, are you taking the right risks, the wrong risks?
And challenge doesn't have to take the form of a sort of a fight, does it? And I think that this is one of the problems that you get. And I hate to say it, guys, but particularly in sort of macho male environments where there's a lot of egos at stake, if somebody's challenged, they see it as a personal challenge rather than questioning on behalf of the business. And this is when you get a lot of frictions unnecessarily. What do you think about that sort of situation?
Yeah, it is very difficult, and we found this recently in things that have been going on where I'm working at the moment. It is hard. People are in jobs, they're directors, and do see a challenge to what they're doing as a personal thing. I don't know, it's managing that like you manage any other situation, really.
It's sort of being grown up about it.
Well, it is, yeah. Unfortunately, not everybody is grown up about it.
Do you think that, and this is where the male-female things comes in, that we've talked a lot in the past on this programme about emotional intelligence, and having that emotional intelligence when you're being challenged can be very useful. Is that, you're nodding your head, Craig, is that something you've come across?
It absolutely is, and we when we work with some of our clients, there's a great code of best practice for boardroom etiquette, which was basically devised for charities and charities with some disabled people working on the board around the time that anybody could speak and the sort of the general acceptable behaviour. And when you start to introduce those kinds of behaviours into the boardroom about respect, integrity, around the way that you challenge and talk to one another, it does engender a real sense of mutual trust and respect rather than this whole macho aggression, which doesn't actually achieve anything.
Can I just bring in a quick point? And that one of the things that I get particularly angry about, and that's like the behaviour in Parliament, because I think that typifies this sort of macho challenging each other, shouting down the speaker and this kind of thing. And I think it's a bad example.
It almost sets an example, doesn't it?
It does.
If those are our leaders,
behaviour.
then yes, it's interesting. That's a very, very interesting point. So there's a whole new show here, I think, that we could cover. There's so much that we could talk about in this whole area. Unfortunately, we haven't got a lot of time. So I've got to thank you both enormously for joining us in the studio and listening to all the clips and sharing your thoughts and knowledge. Is there anything that you'd like to add finally before we head off, unfortunately, into next week's show?
Well, I'd like a little plug for Harpers.
Go on, go for it. You've got 10 seconds.
10 seconds. We're opening a new shop, an exciting new venture at Pepperstock, just outside Harpenden. We're opening the beginning of May. We've got a new shop, coffee shop, function room, and it's very exciting, in the old Half Moon pub at Pepperstock.
You got it in there, just in time.
Just in time.
You've been listening to The Business on Radio Verulam. If there's anything in the show you want to talk to us about, phone us on 01727 839 926 or email thebusiness@radioverulam.com.